I've held that if the United States government happens to fall, by that I mean, the economy happens to collapse, to disappear, to disintegrate, that's the end of it for the world because the United States is the American empire is so big, it's got its tentacles everywhere. It's too big to fail. Okay? So we all would do well in propping up the United States government, especially that one, because it's the biggest government on earth. Okay, and so the question for you today, I've got a couple of questions. That's the first one. It's going to be: is the United States government collapsing? Is it disintegrating? Is it imploding, losing ground? And you see some of the problems that you hear out there. One of them is U.S. protests. There's riots quite often lately. Okay, they're pulling out of Afghanistan. Assessment says that maybe in about 6 months, the Taliban are back in power after so many years, 20 years of fighting. Then we have the problem with Iran, Saudi Arabia, and Israel. That's an ongoing one. We have big problems in Haiti, Honduras, Guatemala, and the Caribbean. Tied to that, Cuba also starting to have riots. Communist country with riots. Can you believe that? North Korea, they don't have riots, they have starvation, unless the Chinese feed them. Then we have South America, Brazil, Colombia, Argentina, Peru, all with major, major problems. A lot of it brought about by the draconian measures taken by the governments because of this COVID stuff. Okay? But they're all suffering. Lots of people who are out of work, especially in the tourist industry. That's what happened to Cuba, by the way. Tourism stopped. Tourism became an important part of the Cuban economy, and then suddenly it collapsed. So yeah, it's a big problem for the Cubans. Chinese, on the other hand, seem to be doing pretty good. Yeah, they're expanding into Africa, especially, also in other regions, at the cost of the United States. Okay. Then you have Russia-China pact. They've got a couple of economic and military pacts out there, treaties and so on. You have Brexit happened just a little while ago. Is this the beginning of the breakup of the European Union? At the bottom you see that's a riot in Indonesia. Today you had another one, or the numbers came out for South Africa. There's riots everywhere. And you better get used to them because riots are going to be very popular. People going out into the streets and protesting. Is something going on? Is something unusual going on? A lot of people might say, well, there's always been problems, problem between countries, within countries, and so on. I think this is a little different, what we're seeing now. Okay, I think what we're staring at or hearing out there is it's a little different than what's happened in the past. I'll tell you why. Big problem that we have today is that we're not expanding. Our population is stagnating. And because of all these problems, the corporations are now going to be, apparently they're going to be taxed at a higher rate. Okay, and here you see there's news came out. Global tax reform plan goes to the G20. Okay, and the G20 and other countries as well, they decided to tax the corporations at a higher rate. And part of the reason is that, a lot of people have lost their jobs and there's not much you can tax from someone who's receiving welfare. And so what happens is, the governments have to get the money somewhere else. And so they want to tax the corporations. Instead of 12%, they want to jack it up to 15%. Apparently, a lot of countries are in agreement with that, except a couple, like, Ireland, for example. They don't like that idea because they entice companies such as Google, Apple, and Facebook to install their headquarters in Ireland in exchange for giving them good tax breaks. And now the European Union and other countries are saying, well, you got to tax them a little higher because we all have to be more or less at the same level. And there are some countries that just don't like that because they're receiving the benefits today of low taxes and so on. So, one of the issues you got to think about is whether it's a good deal to tax major corporations. Okay, but what is the problem? As I see it, this is the problem. And here's a map that puts it on the map. Okay. These are the cities of the world, the big cities of the world, more or less how population is distributed. And I've circled regions, major regions on the planet where there's few people, almost no people, maybe a village here or there. These regions are empty. You could almost say there are more empty regions than filled regions on the planet. Okay. What's the problem? Well, the problem is that everybody is moving to the cities. We have not created new cities in the last 100 years in any significant way. What we've done is people have moved from the country to some cities, made them big, made others even bigger. But what we're doing is abandoning the countryside to the big corporations that do agriculture, and we're not founding new cities in, new villages, new towns in those empty regions. And the question is, are we ever going to do that? Is this ever going to happen? Are we going to fill those regions that I've circled there? Or are we ever going to create new cities? And I don't think so. How would government create a new city? Just force people, with a gun and take them out there to the fields and say, you're going to have to live here from now on. Is that the way it's done? And even if they do that, the question is whether they're going to, have children, which is another issue. And here you see some of the numbers for some of the big countries to see what's going on. This is the big picture, okay? Here's Russia. Population decline more than doubles in 2020. One article that I saw over there. Russian population decline more than doubled in 2020. Okay, Russia's population total 146 million as of January so-and-so, down from 146.75. They lost 700,000 people last year. And Japan population fell by 868,000 in 5 years. Over 5 years, 2020 census shows. United States, what the 2020 census will reveal about America's stagnating growth, and aging population, and youthful diversity. And recently released Census Bureau population estimates show that from July 1, 2019 to July 1, 2020, 1 year, right, the nation grew by just 0.35%. This is the lowest annual growth rate since at least 1900. We're not having children, and part of the reason is we're not creating cities, and part of the reason is that everybody from the country is moving to existing cities and making them, these megalopolis, gigantic monster cities, ant holes, as I call them. And here's Europe, okay, just so you can see the numbers. How to tackle population decline in Europe's regions, one article. Okay, rural area make up to 44% of the EU's surface, but 78% of the European population lives in urban areas or functional urban areas. How about Africa? Well, it's the only continent that seems to be growing. Africa population will triple by the end of the century, even as the rest of the world shrinks. It says Africa will be the only region in the world where population will still be growing at the end of the century. Given a 48% population decline expected where? In China. Yeah, believe it or not, China is going to go down according to the estimates. And it says Nigeria will become the second biggest country by 2100. And it goes in there and says by 2100, up to 183 countries will have fertility rates lower than 2.1 births per woman, which is what's considered as the replacement rate. Okay, so this is the situation. And so the question is whether there's any chance whatsoever of us ever expanding again. If you go back to the 14th century, mid-century, there was apparently the bubonic plague, killed anywhere from 1/3 to half of the population of Europe. And after that, we got rid of the rats, the fleas, right? And population started growing back again. Why? Because it was a young population. Disease kept us down. When it wasn't the bubonic plague, it was maybe smallpox or the childhood diseases, rubella and one of those. And it would kill a lot of the kids, and it would also kill the endemic diseases. It would still kill lots of older people. And so the population was kept young by disease during centuries. And after the 19th century, well, we got used to a lot of these diseases, especially when we went into the cities. We had lots of people in a given place. Lots of people would die when cholera or some other disease attacked. But then after that, we got used to a lot of diseases. We also invented vaccines for those who believe that vaccines help us out with immunity and so on. But the issue is that today we don't have any childhood diseases. They don't kill nearly as many as they would kill at the beginning of the 19th century. In the 1800s, half of the children under the age of 5 would die because of childhood diseases. They had no defenses. Today, we are the descendants of those who lived and procreated and gave us their defenses to us, to most of the population. There are people still out there that have no defenses, but in general, the population has been immunized. So we don't die of diseases today. We die of old age diseases such as heart ailments, diabetes, arthritis. Like in my case, I have arthritis. So, we die of different type of diseases, and they have to do maybe with genetically, how we're genetically structured. At some point you got to die because you can't live forever. And so genetics, sets in. So what's happening is the following. This is what the population of the Earth is looking like. Okay, we're it's the pyramid is inverting. Okay, the question is how fast it's going to invert. That it is inverting and that we cannot do anything about it. I think nobody can say anything about that. Okay, I'll challenge anyone who says that we can do something about it. No, we can't. Women can no longer, not women, but women, plural. Women cannot do anything about procreation anymore. Okay, we're done with procreation. Once you come to the cities, there's no possibility of having children again. Okay, so is Africa going to triple by the end of the century? Absolutely not. Because even in Nigeria, the country that's growing so big, so fast today, everybody's going to be moving to big cities, to Lagos and the main centers. They're going to move from the country to the city. That transition is going on right now. It's going to accelerate later on as much as it can. And once the people get into the cities, the women will not have children. The couples will not have children. They might have one or two. They're not going to have 8 or 10 anymore. That era is going to be gone. So no, there's no way Nigeria is going to triple, for example, its population by the end of the century. Never going to happen. And again, it's the transition that's going to kill birthing. Once we're in the cities, no children. Okay, so yeah, what can I say? You can see the population decline as the growth rate there. By maybe mid-century, we're going to be growing at zero population growth, as it's called. There's going to be no growth of population on Earth. We're not creating cities. The big countries, the important countries, are no longer having children. In fact, a lot of them are already in negative growth. Here in Europe, Spain, Italy, they're already in negative growth. And so if the important countries of the world, part of that G20, okay, if they're not going to have children, are they going to live out of immigration, just allow people from other countries to invade them and do maybe the menial work at the beginning and then rise up and change the composition of society? No, I don't think that's going to happen. There's going to be immigration. There is immigration, a trickle right now. I don't think we're going to evacuate Nigeria by bringing all those people here to Europe. Okay? So the big problem, we're not creating cities. We don't create cities. We're not going to expand our population. We die with the existing cities. I don't think Russia will create a city in Siberia just to populate the country. I don't think Argentina is going to populate the Pampas, form a city over there. It's never going to happen. Whatever cities you see on the world today, that's how the world is going to end, with those cities. They're just going to be filled with more people. Okay? That's my take on that. Okay, second question today is not necessarily related, but it's related to the economy, and that's what I'm referring to when I say, is the United States government going to collapse? Are its colonies, extra-official colonies? They're all colonies, but you don't want to call them that because it's not a very good name. The United States has a lot of influence over those countries, economic influence especially, right? And they have to bow down to a lot of the demands that the United States has because they do commerce with the United States, and the United States otherwise takes revenge. Okay, so it's all the same empire. Okay, so the question is that empire receding now? And if it recedes, if you don't grow, you die. So if the United States is receding economically, at least, maybe not militarily, but economically, can it continue to recede until what? Until it collapses? Or will there be a war and we get back to normal human behavior? Okay? Yeah, there could be a war, but if there is a war, it's an economic issue. So it always comes down to economics. Okay, here's another related issue to economics. We have crypto crime today. New type of crime. Jesse James would rob banks and trains, especially trains. Bonnie and Clyde, they'd rob banks. Those are the good old days. Nobody robs banks anymore. I don't think. Well, some people do, but it's a lot easier to catch them, and it's not as glorious as it used to be. Like, it's an anachronism if you go and rob a bank. No, you do it the modern way. You do crypto scamming, okay? And they found a crypto mining farm in the Ukraine, 3,800 PlayStations and 5,000 computers. You see a picture there. The guy had all these computers there to do crypto mining. Okay? So pretty soon it's going to be big business to get into this crypto crime world. And a lot of people, just like people get into buying cryptocurrency, a lot of people are going to get into crypto crime because it's harder to detect. It's no longer chasing across the state line behind, Dillinger or Bonnie and Clyde. No, now you've got a different situation. You got these anonymous people out there, and they are using computers to attack the system, and you can't always find them so easy. In fact, there's several crimes lately where companies have been forced to pay ransom to get their data back in the United States. The United States accuses Russians and so on. Yeah, so crypto crime is on the rise. And here's another crypto news. Crypto scammer sentenced to 15 years in prison. Swedish, a guy from the European Union, an educated guy, a person who was educated also to respect the law and so on. Swedish citizen Roger Nils Jonas Carlson defrauded thousands of victims and stole tens of millions of dollars over a period that lasted almost a decade. Sentenced to 15 years in prison or to pay his victims $16 million, etc. And he did it all through crypto accounts. They caught him in Indonesia and asked for his extradition. So crypto crime is on the rise and will continue to be on the rise because it's considered by many programmers and so on that they can get away with the crime, that they won't be caught. So get ready for that. That's another thing. And the question is, we've come a long ways from the days of biblical Ruth, being paid with barley. We're no longer in those days. Today, we have cryptocurrency, this abstraction that governs the world, or that is slowly gaining ground on the traditional coins, fiat money, and so on. Is that going to break the World Bank, the piggy bank, the treasury of the world? The fact that we have all this coinage out there that, at least so far, is not regulated. Think about it. Is this out of hand, this cryptocurrency? Should it be regulated, or should we let the market system govern, and those who commit crimes go to prison if they're caught? Okay, so think about that. Okay. Going to the Neanderthals, fellow asks or says, Neanderthal rape never happened. Humans have been known to stick it in all sorts. No doubt there is doubt. Your assumption that Neans and Dinos, Denosivans, I got it wrong, I'll get it right in a second, were entirely different species, respectful of proto-human femmes honor is a little presumptuous. No, it's not a question of being, of them respecting the honor or anything like that. What we're talking about is two different species. Neanderthals are a different species. And so the question for you is, do lions do it with tigers? Assuming you let go of a tiger in lion territory or lion and tiger territory, whichever way, do you think the lion will mate with a female out there or vice versa? No, believe me, they'll attack that other species and kill it, even though there are ligons and ligons and not tigers, tyons. The mixture of lions and tigers. We have them in the zoos, under control of man. Out there in the wild, doesn't happen. Okay, you don't have that in the wild. Okay, you might find, I don't know, maybe some exception out there. It's not the norm. Okay, to say that Neanderthals would sleep with women, and human woman, or a man like this guy running away from the Neanderthal gal. No, I don't think so. And then again, one night stand does not produce the disappearance of a species. In order for there to be a disappearance of a species, every member of the Neanderthals at some point had to have sex, reproductive sex with humans. It can't be just a group, because if the other group continues to have sex among themselves, within the species, then we should see Neanderthals alive today. If we don't see them, it's because every last Neanderthal who procreated would have had to have sex with a human species. And good luck with that one if you think that ever happened. No, absolutely not. And that's why the admixture theory is bunk. It's absolute bunk. It's only put forth by geneticists because they created a cottage industry for themselves. They are the rulers now of Neanderthal extinction. They tell you what to believe. They say, yeah, we proved it. We got 2% Neanderthal DNA. Yeah, I mean, we had a common ancestor 800,000 years or so ago. No wonder. Yeah, Does that mean that they had 40,000, 45,000 years ago? I don't think so. Not in the wild, not when Neanderthals were the worst enemies of a Neanderthal. Humans were the worst enemies of humans. And if a human, a clan walked into Neanderthal territory, I'm sure the Neanderthals would have liquidated them entirely, maybe eaten them, thinking they're some kind of animal, another animal to hunt. Okay, so no, I don't think it ever happened. Okay, along the same lines, the fellow says, there are people who propose a fundamentally different theory. Europeans are in fact Neanderthals with a little bit of admixture from Homo sapiens Africans. In other words, humans came into Europe to enrich the already morphing Europeans. And you go to that site, the site that he mentions, differences between Neanderthal skeleton and the so-called modern humans are certain. Yeah, there are many differences between them. And more than anybody, especially in genetics, these geneticists are willing to admit. They say, yeah, we were different, but we had sex. Well, that's like a weird kind of theory. If we're so different that you can tell the difference even today, 40,000 years later, just by looking at their skeletons, they must have been quite different in real life, quite different. But what did we do? Well, Neanderthal this century, 20th century especially, right, suffered a tremendous evolution, the biggest evolution I've ever seen in any animal species. Here you see it at the beginning of the century. Marcelin Boulay, French guy, he made this picture of Neanderthal, what he thought the Neanderthal looked like, the one on the left, and he looks more or less like a gorilla. And there's the skeleton he got that idea from. He worked together with a paleontologist. And from that skeleton, from that, well, obviously that's already built up, but that's what the guy apparently looked like when you put a little skin over him. But from the skull itself, this is what Boulay came up with. On the other hand, today we have this lady, Elizabeth Daines, and she's a French lady, and what she does is she tries to, reconstruct faces and bodies of old Neanderthals. And this is what she came up with for the same skeleton. She also looked at that skeleton. She came up with this guy on the right, and he's a little bit different than the guy on the left. Okay, among them the hair and a lot of things that are kind of hidden, like behind the beard and the whiskers and so on. So the question is, did Neanderthals look like the guy on the left or like the guy on the right? Who is right? And yeah, if you look at some of the pictures we see today of Neanderthals, in fact, all of them, you can see they look pretty much like humans. Okay, they've humanized them over time. And this is not what you would have found at the beginning of the 20th century. The question is whether this is the right notion of what the Neanderthals look like. Another thing that they do is they clothe Neanderthals when it's absolutely clear that Neanderthals could never have used clothes. Okay, there are no needles, as I explained the other day, and we found obviously no clothes, and I don't think you'll ever find any. You won't find any boots. And the needle, I mean, with all the sites they found from Neanderthals, they found all kinds of tools and weapons. Never have they found a needle. Short or long, fat or skinny, they've never found a needle. And that is strange. You would think that at least one needle would have survived out of so many sites. That's not the case. And so again, Neanderthal had no reason to dress up, but we always dress them up. I guess the actors don't want to be nude on the screen or something. And yeah, this is what you'll see out there. And so what they've done is they made the Neanderthals look like us in great measure. And the more we go into the future, the more they'll look like us because they're trying to push this interbreeding theory, the admixture theory. That's the only reason for that. Okay. Another fellow brings up the issue. He says the out of Africa theory has been debunked decades ago. And out of Africa, for those of you who are not familiar, is that humans essentially were born originally in Africa. They migrated far east, all the way to China, and also to Europe, where we allegedly met the Neanderthals. Okay, this is the theory today, and this fellow is criticizing the out of Africa theory. Well, it's not debunked. Debunked for whom? For you. Okay, unless the proposal is irrational, then you cannot say it's debunked. Irrational. You can say it's irrational, yeah, if it is irrational. Otherwise, there is no such thing as debunking in science. We might use that word informally, but debunk means that you don't believe in a theory. Okay, So it's either irrational, it doesn't belong in science in the first place. If it's rational, the assumption is rational, well, then it can be incorporated into science and you can build upon that. And so we do have a criterion or a set of criteria for what is rational, okay? And the main one I want to put to you out is that third one says theory is inconsistent with or doesn't follow from the assumptions. That would be considered irrational. And so as long as the theory here, follows more or less the assumption, then there is no problem. Then there should be no complaint as far as, or calling it debunked. Debunk only means that you don't agree with it, okay? Okay, let's continue here. Another issue related to extinction. Are we going to leave the planet? Are we going to have be a spacefaring civilization? Are we going to build ships and orbit the Earth? Are we going to go to Mars? Are we going to go to the moon? Or who knows? Well, some people are proposing going to Venus. Let's terraform Venus. They say it's a better candidate than Mars. It's closer. One, it's closer to the sun also. That's good. You get heat instead of cold out there far away in Mars. It's got CO2 just like Mars, but CO2 here in Venus is a little more dense, in fact, quite a bit more dense. It would crush you if you were on the surface of Mars. That's how dense the atmosphere is. We would not be able to resist it. Okay, it's also a lot hotter, I think like 450 degrees centigrade. And they say, okay, but it's got its advantages. It's got almost the same size as Earth, the same mass. That means we don't have to worry about gravity like we would have in the case of Mars. Mars is like anywhere from a quarter to a third of the Earth in mass. It's a small planet, and so it doesn't have the gravity that we have here on Earth. So that would be a problem forever. The other one is that, it's got a very light CO2 atmosphere, and so you would need to turn that into oxygen, but then again, the gravity would not be there to hold that air, and second, the pressure would not be the same as here on Earth. So there are several problems with Mars. A lot better candidate is Venus. The only problem with Venus is to terraform it, like they suggest there, turning it into what it is today to what it should be in the future. It's going to take like 200, 300,000 years, at least with the technology we have today, with the notion that we have of how to convert chemically, one atmosphere into another, CO2 into O2, for example. Okay, so that would take 200, 300,000 years. I'm not even sure we're going to get past the next 30 years, so I think you should forget about that. But it's for people who do a lot of Star Trek and very little real scientific study. They're into technology, not into science, into trying to figure out whether it even is within the laws of probability, that we're going to go to any of these planets or the moon, okay, or in orbiting satellites of some kind, spaceships. Never going to happen. Maybe for tourism, yeah. And talking about tourism, we had this week also another guy that spaced out, and this guy is a billionaire entrepreneur and adventurer. Richard Branson's dream of space travel was realized, and celestial tourism took a leap forward Sunday as Virgin Galactic's rocket ship reached the edge of space during a historic flight from Spaceport America. And turns out he's a billionaire there, okay? And it says, okay, he went up into space, he was floating out there, he was all excited, okay? And there was a comment from Senator Bernie Sanders, and he said the following: he said, Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders was less impressed. Here on Earth, in the richest country on the planet, half our people live paycheck to paycheck. People are struggling to feed themselves, struggling to see a doctor. But hey, the richest guys in the world are off in outer space. Yes, it's time to tax the billionaires. Should we tax the billionaires? Should we tax the big corporations? Like I started the talk today. Is that what's going to solve it? Take the money from the rich and give it to the poor, little Robin Hood kind of stuff? Or should we allow the money to stay in the hands of those who are wise entrepreneurs? Yeah, they have a little fun on the side, like going into space, but they're going to invest money supposedly and create corporations which put people to work, and maybe that's for the better of mankind. And then there's the issue of speed. By the time these guys put a corporation, we're all dead, and so maybe right now is the time to tax them, give the money to the poor somehow, through some mechanism, fiscal or monetary, and have people be able to make it to the end of the month. So again, it's always that fight between conservatism and liberalism. Democrats, Republicans, communists, capitalism, there's always that fight. Okay? It's been eternal. I don't think we'll ever eradicate in what little time remains here on Earth for us. Anyways, I always encourage people to do Extinction 101 before 102. 101 is mass extinction of past animals. 102 is human extinction. Before we can talk about human extinction, it's good to find out what happened to the animals in the past. Maybe the same thing's going to happen to us, and we can't do anything about it. Okay, and a good place to start is with what I call the homework, and that's the question is, why did the animals on land, that's really for Extinction 101, why did the animals on land die almost at the same time as the animals in the seas? Okay, and so yeah, that's where we stand on all that. Because if you can figure out why animals on land died more or less at the same time as animals in the seas, maybe you have the clue to how extinctions happened in the past, and maybe you can extrapolate those to man and figure out if we can do anything about that same process.